The NBA schedule is released. What does it mean for the Charlotte Hornets? We'll break it down all today on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
We're Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere to get your podcast, and that does include YouTube. That's Doug Branson. You can find his work on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. And I'm Walker Mail. You can listen to me every weekday on Sports Radio 92.7 WFNZ, 12 to 3 p.m. I don't want to waste any time, Doug. You're not feeling great. I want to get you in and out. You seem to be in good spirits, but I know deep down you're dealing with the sickness that has actually gotten worse and moved into different places. Ooh.
Yeah, we're not talking about that sickness. Sickness there is no cure for. We're talking about this other sickness that is the phlegm that has now migrated down into my chest. And you may notice my voice level dropping a few baritones. There is once a year where my voice, when I'm sick and Walker is healthy, and my voice converges with Walker's voice. And it's like a vocal eclipse that occurs when I'm down here where Walker normally is. So that you're witnessing the vocal equinox.
I like that. Yes, it's all darkness now. It's that's all it is.
It's deep.
The vocal eclipse is great. Well, maybe we could joke and have some other silly season intros on other days, but not today, Doug. The NBA schedule, it's released. We have a lot of notes to get to for the Charlotte Hornets. Wanted to give you the highlights, and then we could ask some big picture questions here. So 35th anniversary. Don't know if you guys knew that. 35th anniversary this year. For the Charlotte Hornets.
Wow. Really?
So we can celebrate that. Season opener is on Wednesday, October 25th, at home versus the Atlanta Hawks. A couple of the big games you have. You match up against LeBron. That'll be on Monday against February 5th. Steph Curry, March 29th. On a Friday, he'll be coming to town, I believe. So those are a couple of big matchups. One interesting note, by far the most interesting to me, to be honest with you, how about the longest homestand in franchise history taking place this year? 8 straight home games from March 27th through April 9th. So that homestand, if it's crunch time, Doug, that homestand is going to help them hopefully get to the play-in and, God forbid, maybe even beyond the play-in, but at least just solidify a play-in spot and then be a higher seed so you can host a play-in game that helps you get to one of those top 6 spots. 19 weekend home games, 15 sets of back-to-backs. That's always something to note. So 15 sets of back-to-back games, 6 of which are 2 consecutive home contests. Don't want to get drowned into the details, but I thought those were the highlights. Doug, with all of those highlights that I just talked about, some of the stuff that you've gone over, do you think this is a schedule conducive to winning and somewhat favorable for the Charlotte Hornets in this year where they're trying to make the play-in after what was a disaster after all the injuries last year?
I do think this is a schedule that actually benefits them in a number of ways. If you go to Positive Residual on Twitter, they do a great job of breaking down travel times and rest advantages and rest disadvantages and strength of schedule. The strength of schedule for the Hornets, 19th strongest, so they're down towards the bottom tier, the weaker tier in terms of strength of schedule. Rest advantages 10, that's not a lot. That's 19th in the league. But rest disadvantages also 10 games. That's 12th. So that's above average in terms of games where they're going to be at a disadvantage due to rest. And then miles traveled, they're only 23rd most. So they're down towards the bottom. So they're not going to be doing, a ton of, back and forth across the country kinds of things. So that's conducive, I think, to winning. Early on, they're going to have a number of home games that I think can get them off to a good start. But you mentioned the 8-game homestand. That actually comes after their most brutal stretch of the season. And that begins as soon as they get back from the All-Star break on February 22nd until March 25th. They do 13 on the road and 4 at home, including 4 of those 15 back-to-backs. And then they get the 8-game homestand. So the 8-game homestand is almost a reward for what will be a defining stretch for this team from the end of February until March. The good news is that the Hornets, when they were fully healthy last season, played really well during that stretch. Like, it seemed like all the things that Clifford was trying to instill in the team, combined with the fact that they were getting healthier, made the Hornets look like a functional offense and a much better defense. So if that holds again, if they continue to improve and stay even healthier, then maybe they'll be able to survive that 17-game stretch. At least, you just don't want that to be apocalyptic, so that then you can make up a little ground during that 8-game homestand.
So 100%. I think you have that homestand. There's actually 3 road games that you end the season with after that 8-game homestand.
Yeah.
If you're looking at this schedule, Doug, I don't know if this is how it always is, but I don't think so. Looking at it, it feels like the games based on the home and away, right? They're not nearly as spread out. It's not some just throw it against the wall and see how it goes. It feels very, this is your road trip. This is your homestand. This is your road trip. This is your homestand. At least for me, I feel like they're all consolidated into that. So you start with a 3-game, you're at home for 3 games. We said homestand a million times. You're home for 3 games in a row to start the season. And then you play 5 of your next 6 games on the road. Then you play your next 5 games at home. Then you play your next 3 games on the road. We can keep doing this. You have the road trip out west, which is, always baked into the schedule. You always have your West Coast road trip. But then you go even to the second half. Here we are talking about playing those 8 games at home that you do. You have another 4-game road trip out of East, Philly, Orlando, Atlanta, Cleveland. That's in the middle part of March. It's very home, away, like buckle up. And when you're traveling, you're going to be out there for a while. When you're here, you're going to be here for a while. It feels very black and white without any of the, well, no, all right, we'll just going back and forth. A lot more like that to me this year than in previous seasons.
Well, I think there's 2 factors. One that's always a factor with the Charlotte Hornets, and then one that's different, but not just for the Charlotte Hornets, for every team in the NBA. The one that's the same for the Hornets every season is that this is a team that will manipulate the schedule to get more weekend games. They want more, these lower end teams that are not killing it at the box office are going to lobby the NBA for, more weekend opportunities. And that's going to cause issues with the rest of your schedule if the NBA decides to help you and accommodate you on those things. So that's always been a factor for the Charlotte Hornets. It will continue to be a factor until they contend for a few years and that box office reality changes. Okay. So that's a little bit of a chicken and the egg thing, because you're kind of hurting your schedule, which hurts your opportunity to contend, but hopefully talent supersedes that disadvantage. Okay. But I did say they only had 10 rest disadvantage games according to Positive Residual. So it's not as bad this season. The other factor that's different for every team is this midseason tournament. And if you look at the top of the schedule prior to the midseason tournament, they play the Knicks, the Heat, and the Wizards, all 3 teams in their group play. They play those teams 3 times before Christmas. So you're getting 3 of what would normally be 4 matchups out of the way before Christmas. So there are all kinds of, I think, oddities. We don't even know 2 regular season games. We only know for sure about 80 of these games. 2 of them will be played around the beginning of Christmas if they don't make the tournament, if they don't make the actual tournament through group play, which we don't expect them to. So there are all kinds of oddities. Plus it's a leap year. I mean, things are crazy.
But the leap year, I like the leap year. I like that being in the schedule highlights. Your homestand, your longest road trip. What are you doing on the leap day?
They're playing the Milwaukee Bucks on leap day. And let me tell you something. If you don't think Eric Collins is going, because leap day is an extra day in February. People who have birthdays on leap days, we joke that they're like 12 years old because they had to skip their actual day for right. So I'm sure Eric Collins is going to have some fantastic weird stat for you about these games that only exist on the calendar once every 4 years.
Final thing for me, it does also feel like it's an easier start than usual. This is how it is, right? With the Charlotte Hornets, they always have a brutal start. It's always real tough, and the record indicates that. I remember one year, man, it probably was like, I forget what season it was, but it would have been 2015, maybe even 16. It was a while back when they were third in the conference after 10 games, something crazy. It was a good start, and that's the last good start that I can remember. This is, look, Atlanta at home, Detroit at home, Brooklyn at home, Houston on the road, Indiana on the road, Dallas on the road, home and home against Washington, and then you're starting to get into a tough stretch with on the road against New York, Miami, Milwaukee. But, Doug, we're talking about, what? You're getting almost to 10 games, and then once you get to the 10th game, that's when Miles Bridges will be eligible, and I believe Milwaukee, November 17th on a Friday. That is when Miles Bridges will be eligible to play. Probably the last thing to note specifically for this team because of the suspension Miles Bridges will have to serve.
Yeah, and I believe, is that not one of the group play games, that Milwaukee game?
It is indeed.
Because we had talked about,
indeed.
Yeah, we talked about we didn't know when Miles would return for the group play. So in the midst of group play, they have to figure out what all of that means. Does Miles immediately start? Does he come off the bench? That's probably not a wrench that a coach would enjoy having to deal with for this group play. But you get extra talent back. So, I think it's kind of a push-pull thing there. The other interesting thing that I saw is that, they, by my count now, I've been sick and I went over this. I don't know if I was totally coherent when I did so, but I couldn't find any of those weird not home and home, but home matchups where you play the same team at home twice in a row. They had employed some of those to cut down on travel.
Right.
I didn't see any of those. The Hornets have, I think, 5 home and homes where they will play a team at home and then go to their arena. But I couldn't find any of those weird things. They seem to have eliminated those from the schedule. I don't know if it's just a Hornets thing or if they've done that for all the teams.
No, you're right. It did happen. I would think it happened quite a bit last year. I don't see it either. You do have a couple of those home and homes that you mentioned, though. I like Sick Doug schedule takes, by the way. It's like, man, they're playing in the Coliseum. Oh, okay. All right. That's going to be interesting. What's going on? Oh, the Bobcats? Are we back? Okay. I like Sick Doug takes on all sorts of NyQuil and medication.
My takes are in depth, and so is my voice, but I can't guarantee coherency. I can't guarantee that they make any sense.
That's okay. All right, well, let's see if you make sense on the other side of the break. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
We'll give you some final schedule takes, and I am going to get to the list today. So I have a new section to dive into. I'll give you a couple of players in the second segment as well as a couple of players in the third segment, but not before FanDuel, because this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets back every single time that they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets, too, on everything from spreads to player props, over-unders, even more than that. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. More Locked On Hornets coming up next.
Is Locked On Hornets.
Adam Silver had Ahmad Rashad up on stage, and he used his phone to body scan Ahmad Rashad, and then they inserted a digital version of Ahmad Rashad into the highlight. And so I'm looking at this and going, just fix my league pass. I don't want to be in a highlight. I would just like to actually watch the highlight without my application logging me out, freezing, dropping all of the time. Fix my league pass before you insert me in the game, please and thank you.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
All right, we'll do more on the schedule next week. We need to prolong this content. And the NBA schedule is the savior of content when we're at this portion of the season. We still have silly season stuff. We still need to do who wore it best stuff. We still have the list to get to. Doug is going to give you his nickname list next week. He's been doing all these shows despite what Dr. Horst said.
I'm going to make you wait for
That's right.
it.
It's the list of integrity. Mine is not. So we're just going to – the nickname list has become more important than the top 35 Hornets list because of all the research and because it is a list of integrity. And mine is just we're talking it out. We're vibing.
Well, people care about it. I've already gotten comments threatening me if I don't include Mason Plumlee, Plum Dog Millionaire. And I'm going to stand here and say this. I will not be intimidated. Okay. I will not be influenced. My list is my list. It is the constitution of this show. It is what will guide us to freedom. So that's that. You won't intimidate me, YouTube chat. It may be Mason Plumlee's in there. Maybe Plum Dog Millionaire makes it, but you'll just have to wait and see and continue watching our show.
If it was the Declaration of Independence, I would ask if there was a map to a playoff series win on the back of it. That's what I was going to ask. But if there's not, then that's fine. We can move on. Let's go to the newest section, 24 through 21 on the top 35 Charlotte Hornets of all time list. Are you ready for it, Doug?
Yeah, I've got the fanfare ready.
Okay. All right. So this section is called Haphazard Hornets. Haphazard Hornets is this section. This one was really tough. I'll tell you this. You could argue any one of these guys in any one of these slots. It's also because of that very reason as to why I spent a lot more time than I should have on these 4 slots. And so I feel good about where I ended up, but it took me a long time to get here. So with that said, the 24th best Hornet of all time, Doug Branson, Hersey Hawkins.
Wow. Hersey,
24.
Great shooter in a time when there weren't a ton of great shooters. Athletic, too. Hersey Hawkins. Love some Hersey.
This again, Haphazard Hornets. These are the 4 that it was really tough to put all throughout the list. Hersey played 2 years with this team, started 82 games both seasons. So 164 starts in 2 seasons combined. Just a straight up Iron Man. Really good, a really good basketball player in that role where he only made 1 All-Star team in his career. He actually made it with Philadelphia before he came over to the Charlotte Hornets.
Hold on. Don't say only. I mean, there are countless numbers of players that don't make any All-Star game. To make what you are discounting 1 All-Star appearance. I mean, that's great.
I was going to say, aren't you sick?
I'm sick of you. I'm sick of you downplaying the achievements of professional basketball players who make all-star games. What are we going to say? LaMelo's only made 1 all-star game? Look, my voice can get even deeper. Go on.
What I was trying to say is that Hersey Hawkins is a really good player that, hold on, Doug, only made 1 all-star game, but felt like he was good enough to be on the fringe of a lot of other all-star appearances and possibly even make. That's what I was going to say.
Why didn't you just say that? Why didn't you just say that?
This is tough. Okay. Anyways, so he made it in 1990, 1991 with Philadelphia. So 2 seasons, averaged over 14 points per game for both of those teams. Great free throw shooter. Actually did not shoot very well from the 3-point line his first year here with Charlotte. But the second year, I mean, bonkers. 44% from 3. Decent volume, I guess, for that time. And if you look at those 2 years that he played, they were 500 his first season, but then played on one of just a few 50-win seasons that this team has ever had. In fact, I caught a Hardwood Classic, Doug, on NBA TV, where they showed Shaquille O'Neal scoring 46 in an overtime game against the Hornets. That 50-win season, Alonzo's last year. Of course, Orlando would move on to the NBA Finals at the end of that year. But very good, same thing, really short time, played on one of the 50-win teams, but still like not Dell, not Alonzo, not Larry. Right. So further down the list, but still a very good player. What are your thoughts?
Well, he was on my honorable mentions for his nickname, Hawk. I think there were a few people in professional sports that dominated that nickname a little bit more than Hersey Hawkins, but I love a good Hawk nickname
Andre
from Hawkins.
Dawson?
Andre Dawson, yeah, is the name that popped up the most. So, he gets in my honorable mentions, but Hersey Hawkins, great player. Love Hersey.
Also led the team in win shares his first season. How about that? So pretty crazy there. All right, 23. Rex Chapman comes in just in front
now,
of Hersey
wait a
Hawkins.
minute. Okay. Where was Rex Chapman? We need to get him on the show. Where was Rex Chapman? He's on everybody else's show. Where was Rex Chapman in your previous list?
So Rex Chapman on my previous list, and I thought I was going to move him way far down. He was actually 17th on the previous list.
That was probably too high. I think 23. I think settling him in. I think that was a good correction. Rex Chapman, the first ever draft pick for the Charlotte Hornets, the first ever rookie draft pick, and 23 is a good number because I think he thought he was going to be Michael Jordan, and he wasn't, and there was a little bit of issue there with what he thought he was and what the organization thought he was, and it resulted in him ultimately moving on from the team.
Sure. So here's the thing for Rex Chapman, right? I put him in front of Hersey Hawkins, even though Hersey probably was a more winning conducive player, if we want to stick with that theme, than Rex. Rex, I think that actually holds value, being the first ever draft pick, being in a dunk contest a couple of times. People think of Rex Chapman, I think, as a Charlotte Hornet, and maybe a Sun too, a little bit, but Charlotte Hornets for sure. You remember him doing the behind the back alley in the dunk contest. It was cool to see that. Also scored a lot. Bad team though, so a lot of points, but not a team that was anywhere close to the playoffs at the beginning of the Charlotte Hornets tenure. 17 points his rookie year, 17 and a half second season, 16 his third season, only played 22 games in 91-92. Traded for Tom Hammonds. Hammonds didn't do anything. So when you lose a all rookie team member that was also your first ever draft pick for a Tom Hammonds who does nothing. I think actually maybe only appeared in 12 games. I could look it up. But there was some
good nicknames there. Though. He had some good nicknames. Now he didn't make the list. Didn't even make my honorable mentions just because I don't think he had the contributions that I could justify him being on the list above other folks. But his nicknames were, so Tom Hammonds, his nicknames were not the Hammer. It was Hambone and the Terminator.
Oh, those
why
Hambone
wouldn't you go the
Tominator?
The Tominator. I don't know.
Yeah, Hambone is great. So Hammonds appeared in 19 total games for Charlotte and averaged 2.3 points per game in that time. I mean, so just that trade alone, it's tough. And then Rex would bounce around with other teams. But first overall draft pick, dunk contest, scored a lot of points, was a reason that you might go to the arena to go see that guy in the early stages when everybody was excited about Hornets basketball. But was there before they had any kind of team success. I thought this was the right spot for Rex Chapman. He comes in at 23.
Well, and what's interesting, too, is that the Hornets opted in the franchise draft, the expansion draft, to take the worst of the picks among Miami. So they got the second overall pick in that franchise draft. In exchange, they got the better of the rookie draft picks, which ended up being 8th, and Miami selected 9th. So we take Rex Chapman 8th, and 9th is Ronnie Cycli, who I think if you put the careers back to back, Ronnie Cycli was the better player. So
I don't know if anybody, out of all the draft history regrets, I don't know if anybody goes to Cycli, but you're right.
What people have to understand is that what people have to understand is that it started this way, right? There are origins that go all the way back to the beginning of this franchise. But on the Rex Chapman thing, I don't think that anyone thinks of him as a Charlotte Hornet or a Phoenix, or at least the majority of people think of him as this Twitter person that posts funny videos. I don't even think people think that he's a basketball player. I think about him as a Phoenix Sun because he was in this Game Boy game that was just the All-Star weekend. It was the 3-point shooting contest and the dunk contest. And it was all of those kinds of things on a Game Boy game. And he was selectable as a Phoenix Sun. So that's how I'll always remember him.
So as a kid, I did. But then I also had the basketball cards of Rex Chapman in that, it's like the iconic set. Everybody had all the basketball cards. I forget what it was. Not Hoops Hype. I forget what it was. Anyways. Yeah. So dicey, but he comes in at number 23. Let's move on.
Sexy Rexy.
Yep. Plus did you just want to create that nickname and put him in there? I mean, is that?
I've heard people, I don't know that was technically, I don't think that's on Basketball Reference.
Okay.
Check my list here. No, the Boy Wonder was what was on probably from Kentucky, because he was a young player that I think people thought, whoa, okay, well, this guy's got something.
All right. 2 more guys, a part of the haphazard Hornets list. We'll bring that to you coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Is it hot in here? I'm sweating. I'm just dripping in sweat.
All right. Let's get Doug out of here. We have 2 more Hornets to get to on the top 35 Hornets list of all time. It's coming up. Final segment, Locked On Hornets. All right, haphazard Hornets here, Doug. Hersey Hawkins, 24.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good. Yeah.
Were you taking a break? I'm sorry. Hersey Hawkins, that made me laugh. Hawkins, 24. Rex Chapman, 23. Number 22. I've called him possibly the most underrated Hornet of all time. Johnny Newman. Johnny Newman comes in at 22. Multiple 40-point games for the Charlotte Hornets in his tenure here. Played in different roles through 3 seasons in total with the Hornets, and then played 18 games in the 93-94 season. You'll see that with some of these guys on the list get traded mid-season. Scored 17 points per game in 90-91. Started 81 games. 91-92, started 55, appeared in 55, averaged just over 15 points per game. Then went to a different role in 92-93. That's when the Hornets, as you know them, were starting to form. That's when you had Zoe. That's when you were starting to get LJ implemented. There's Muggsy. Automatically, Johnny has to take a step back, but does so in an efficient way. So here's someone that, did not shoot well from the three-point line, didn't put up a whole lot of three-point shots, but was very efficient from 2 and was efficient overall from the field. Got to the foul line as well, had over 5 free throw attempts per game in each of his first 2 seasons. So different roles, could be the microwave. Johnny Newman, to me, this is why I've often called him possibly the most underrated Hornet. So part of this, too, is Hornets fans' perception of these players. I'm trying to bake that into the cake when we discuss top 35 Hornets list. But also, I don't want to just completely ignore what Newman meant to a team where he wasn't as popular, because then you started to have Zoe and LJ, but he was still important. So 22, that's where I had him on the list.
Well, he laid the groundwork. He made the offense that was not functional, he made it functional. And I think that was his role before the team formed, the LJ, Zoe, Muggsy. This was a team that came into the league in 88 and were what most franchise expansion franchises are. They were a disaster on both ends of the floor. Johnny Newman's addition meant that they were at least respectable offensively, because it was really like one of their first, I think, weapons that was brought to the team instead of via the draft. That was important. The other guy that I kind of think of when I think of Johnny Newman is David Wingate, because David Wingate was the same as Johnny, except on the defensive end of the floor.
Right, exactly.
So these were 2 kind of role players that came in and made them, because then when you got LJ and when you got Zoe, then you became like a powerhouse offense, and an offense that was a little ahead of its time in terms of getting up and down the floor, playing with pace. And Wingate was able to come in and give them a little bit more of a defensive presence, a little bit more physicality on the wing position. And so I'll always think of those 2 guys kind of in concert. But Johnny Newman, really good offensive player.
Just straight bucket getter, man. So Newman played 23 minutes per game in the best season that he played with the Hornets after playing 30 each of his first 2 seasons, but shot 52% from the field and averaged 12 points per game on 23 minutes. Just come in and get a bucket, Johnny. And that's exactly who he'd do.
Johnny on the spot.
Player. Yeah, fun player when you would go back and look at what he was able to do. All right, last one in the haphazard Hornets list. I'll give you a guess here, Doug. He's a Bobcat. 21. You want to go with it?
Boris Diaw.
No, not on the list, Boris Diaw. Sorry. 21 on the haphazard Hornets, Steven Jackson. Captain Jack.
Wow, too low.
You think so?
I didn't want to guess Steven Jackson because I just couldn't believe that you would have him this low. Unbelievable.
I mean, look, you could put him at 24, to be honest, but I didn't think you could after that's what I thought. I thought maybe you could even put him a little lower, but you're right. Steven Jackson comes in as a guy that helps this Hornets team, this Bobcats team, get to its first ever postseason appearance after the Hornets leave. So Gerald Wallace, the best player on that team, but Steven Jackson was the offensive guy. The attitude, the character, that is what allows him to even be bumped up this high, right? It's not only that he was a good player on a postseason team, but it's also the fact that he gave us maybe the best quote of all time. I make love to pressure. Yeah. Rick Bonnell repeated that line every single season, and it wasn't enough. Loved covering Steven Jackson, at least with the type of personality that he have. If you start to dive into the numbers for what Steven did for this team. So comes over from winning franchises, right? San Antonio wins a championship Indiana, remember that Malice at the Palace team could have won the championship that year, but everybody got suspended because you can't fight with the fans in an NBA arena.
To find out.
Yeah, we actually found that out.
Cannot go to war with the fans.
That's true. So started 72 games first season, 67 games second season, 21 points average, 18.5 points averaged in the second year. We know how that team, got blown up eventually. Gerald Wallace would be traded not too long. So Steven Jackson is the only guy. And the second year, they don't get to the postseason. But a real leader, people love him. This is one where I think the fan base's opinion of him carry a lot of weight. And he legitimately helped a Bobcats team that is viewed as maybe the worst run franchise in the history of American sports. Like, you're in that conversation. So the fact that he was able to be a big time player on a postseason team, that's why I have him as high as 21 here, Doug. And we can go back. So Hersey Hawkins, Rex Chapman, Johnny Newman, Steven Jackson. Do you like that list as it is, except for maybe you still think Steven is too low?
Yeah, no, I'm not totally upset with the list, and I got to hear the rest of your list. But my gut tells me that Steven Jackson made a franchise that was completely irrelevant, helped make it relevant. Not on his own, as you mentioned, Gerald Wallace was still the engine of the team. But I thought, Stack Jack was something that the Hornets, not the Bobcats, the Hornets of the 2016 playoff variety, led by Kemba Walker, is what they needed. They needed like a personality. They needed a vocal leader because that wasn't Kemba. Kemba led by example. And you don't want guys who can't lead vocally, trying to lead vocally. It's not going to come across as genuine and people aren't going to accept it. But that's what made, I think, the Wallace-Steven Jackson combo work, is that you had Wallace out there, not leading by example, not necessarily a vocal leader, and then you had Stack Jack, the personality. And I think it was something that was missing from some of those early second Hornets era teams. So I love Stack Jack. I'll tell you what, he's going to be higher on my list. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah. Stack Jack is so good. I mean, it's so good. All right, that's the list. I'll say it one more time. Haphazard Hornets, Hersey Hawkins, 24. Rex Chapman, number 23. Oh, we're in sicko season mode right now. Johnny Newman, 22. And Stack Jack, Steven Jackson rounds it out at 21. Top 20 list. Next time we do this.
I've been suppressing a cough for 20 minutes.
All right, let's get this man out of here. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. Make Game to Game your second listen anywhere you get your podcast. Only the Locked On Podcast Network has you covered every single game during the season across the landscape of the association. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. Doug, get better, buddy. We're pulling for you. We'll be back with you next week sometime.
Maybe.